Let's see who fists them the fastest. Yours or mine?
The Ip Man films have become one of the most dependable martial arts action franchises of recent memory, with the third especially a big success worldwide. Boasting a who's who cast of on-screen martial arts legends and some renowned talent behind the camera, each has something impressive to offer, and seen together as a trilogy, it is one of the more satisfying on-screen martial arts experiences you can have. I wasn't sure whether to look at each film individually or as a trilogy, but felt that as each one shared much of the same creative team and actors, it would be interesting to see how the films have evolved from the release of the first in 2008. Each is directed by veteran action filmmaker Wilson Yip, who has been responsible for some modern martial arts classics such as Flashpoint, SPL or Killzone as it's also known, and the entertaining if flawed Dragon Tiger Gate, all starring Donnie Yen, who here appears as the legendary Ip Man himself. With action direction and choreography by respected martial artist Sammo Hung, the first two films share a distinctive visual style in the action sequences, whilst the third replaced Hung with Hollywood's go-to guy Yuen Woo-ping, leading to something a little different, though each film, especially the third, quietly used Yen in the same role to great effect. I'm not going to go into too much else other than the action, but I can say these films are worth watching for everything also outside of the fighting, with basic good versus evil plots and a wonderfully nuanced performance by Donnie Yen that ties everything together. I was glad actually to see Yen return to Hollywood in Rogue One and XXX3 recently, as hopefully it'll introduce a much larger audience to this guy's always brilliant work, both as a martial artist and as an actor. There is a pretty obvious template to these films of Ip Man having to prove himself to someone whilst defending his community through teaching values and usually beating a lot of people up with Wing Chun, in what usually amounts to a sort of tournament film format. Fights break out a lot, increasing in difficulty and narrative importance until a final battle that proves finally Ip Man to be the best, not only because of his skill, but also his values. With a mix of one-on-one and one versus many battles, you get a good variety of fights, but I did find the first two films to be just slightly lacking a little compared to the third when it came to the direction and editing of the fight sequences. Only a little though, let me be clear. They are very energetic and the camera work is great, it just maybe edits a little more than I would have liked, something the third has less of. Really though, this is definitely more enjoyable and certainly technically better than most on-screen fights you will see these days, and I will never grow tired of seeing Donnie Yen and Sammo Hung in combat. There is also a very well-handled, developing intensity for each fight, as if each has its own narrative, starting calmer and gradually becoming more and more fierce until the inevitable, brutal resolution. This will also never not be badass. The third film is actually the weaker overall for me from a narrative sense, as the story just felt less tight and sometimes a little directionless. The first two had great villains and a very clear motivation, but the third lacks a decent antagonistic presence, with Mike Tyson simply not being that good of an actor, and not really appearing enough to have any impact. Also, the late introduction of the struggle of Ip Man's wife comes a little bit too late and felt a little bit rushed through, though seeing how their relationship evolves in this film was really quite nice. As said earlier, the third for me does have the best fight sequences. The choreography isn't much different, but the style of shooting is improved a little. They open up the frame a lot more and cut less vigorously so that you can really see what is happening more easily, especially when a character takes on multiple enemies. The one time they really do get in a lot closer during the fight between Tyson and Yen actually feels right. Tyson was a boxer whose technique was to get in close and dig deep, destroying his opponent in a distinctly brutal fashion. Tyson may not have made a great villain, but this is an exhilarating fight sequence. I just wish I'd spent a little bit more time with the villain beforehand. The Ip Man films are not masterpieces, but they are definitely worth seeing. Filled with impressive martial arts and a very affecting story, they do a great job of providing a decent amount of variety throughout the three films. Each feels distinct and yet are best enjoyed as a whole. Seeing the mixing of martial arts, the Chinese versus Japanese, the East versus the West, and then Wing Chun versus Wing Chun, kept me from feeling like the films were ever retreading old ground. My favourite is the second, where the martial arts action and the story really came together, with the third the least balanced, saved by the quality of its action sequences, and the first just a great all-round film. But any one of them is good enough to be recommended. There is a fourth coming, and I honestly don't know how it will end up. provided they find a story more in line with the first two but keep the lessons learned action-wise from the third, I imagine we will get another film worth seeing.